Imagine what that could do to your insides.
Make them more shiny.
But where's this stuff coming from?
Nobody knows.
Still Game. Refreshing new comedy continues Friday at 9:30 on BBC One.
It's time for Ben to move on and start living his life. EastEnders after Tuesday's One Show.
Well, hello everybody and welcome to The One Show with Alex Jones.
And Matt Baker. Now, tonight's guests are two top comedians who've decided to join forces for a nationwide tour.
Yes, but as they are equally well known and equally funny, nobody really knows who is topping the bill. So please welcome Jasper Carrott. Jasper Carrott. Oh, it's not working, is it? Anyway, in no particular order, please welcome Jasper Carrott and Alistair McGowan. There we are. Fans are in tonight, Jasper.
Oh, what a treat having you both with us. That's lovely, because you are, as we said, joining forces for this brand new tour. Now, you didn't really know each other beforehand, did you? So what have you learnt about each other then, pre-tour?
Well, I've learnt a lot about comedy from watching this masterful comedian. And also, I suppose, one thing I'd forgotten about Jasper, actually, which I sort of learnt, is what a good musician he is.
Yes.
He plays guitar beautifully.
We saw a clip of you earlier,
We were talking about that, weren't we?
Plays really well. But I'm sorry he doesn't play my favourite song of his in our show, which is, dare I say it, Funky Moped, which was the B-side of Magic Radio. And it passed into folklore in our family, because the last line, which you only heard on the fade, was, my mum won't let me mend it in the kitchen, I have to fix it in the garden. And I still call the garden the gardening.
I was just about to ask if you do an impression.
Well, as you can see, I don't. I don't. That was just a Brummie accent.
But we understand that you do an impression of Alistair doing an impression of you, is that right?
Yes, I do a brilliant impression of Alistair doing me. In fact, I'm doing it right now.
Hey!
It's seamless, isn't it? I mean, it's like I was in the room with you.
Taught him everything. Hours of practice, that one.
Brilliant.
Yes.
Well, tomorrow, right, we're joined by Tom Hanks. He's going to be sitting there. Now, this might sound a bit strange, but trust us, all will become clear. So, Matt?
Yeah, we want to see your photos of lost items you've seen on the street. For example, gloves, shoes, socks, scarves, hats, rickshaws even, who knows? Toys, anything you like.
Very good. Very good. Very good.
Yes, send us photos of them, preferably in situ. Tell us who you are, where you found them. And with Tom's help, we might feature them on tomorrow's show, when we're also joined by Ron Howard, the director of the new film Inferno, and Felicity Jones.
I suddenly feel a bit B-list, don't you?
Yes.
It's a great line. I know we're going to put a photo up at the end of tonight's programme. You look at it and you think, wow.
Yeah, but can they do an impression of Matt Baker? No.
Probably not. We'll ask
they
them.
say at home.
Now then, if you are a friend of property developer Khalid Mahmood Chowdhury, do us a favour, pick up the phone, give him a ring and tell him that he's about to be on telly.
Because, Mr. Chowdhury, this film is all about you.
Behind all this scaffolding is one of Grimsby's most historic buildings. Built in 1889 and Grade 2 listed, the Victoria Mill supplied flour to the world.
Now, the parts of the building which aren't covered in scaffolding were converted into flats around 15 years ago. And the same thing was meant to happen to the main silo in the middle, but it didn't. And it was left to become something of an eyesore, and a dangerous one at that.
Dave Needham owns one of the existing flats, but for 4 months earlier this year, home suddenly wasn't home.
Which flat's yours? The third one, which is a second-storey high. Fancy we have a look?
That'd be nice, yeah.
The neighbouring silo had deteriorated so much that in February's storms, dangerous movement was detected, and police had to clear the building fast.
What was it like when you found out that you were going to have to get out of here and get out of here quick?
Bit of a shock to the system. The police was actually at the door with their foot in the door while you got in and got your gear out.
And you had no idea that you were going to be there for 4 months, did you?
No, we thought it'd be like 1 or 2 days, maybe a week at the most.
In the end, residents spent nearly 4 months in emergency accommodation.
Who paid for all your out-of-pocket expenses while you were over at the hotel?
The council paid for the accommodation, but we've had to pay for all the meals and everything else ourselves.
The council paid up, even though the mill's not theirs, it's privately owned. But there was more. With the silo in a dangerous state and no response from the owner, the council also paid to make it safe, costing £1 million of public money.
And the costs are still mounting because every day the council have to go on site to inspect it and see if it's still safe.
Today, surveyor Andy Cole is going up the scaffolding to check for further damage. Meanwhile, we've been given exclusive access inside. Councillor David Watson is with me.
Look at this place.
Yeah, it's huge, isn't it?
It's got the scale of a cathedral, hasn't it?
There's as much scaffolding on the inside as there is on the outside, and the council's set to pay a further £1.2 million, making it watertight.
Can you afford to spend more than £2 million on an empty building?
Not really. The council's in severe financial pressure due to government austerity measures. We're looking at everything we spend, but public safety comes first.
Why don't you just present the bill to the owner, say, we've spent £1 million, it's your responsibility, you cough up the cash?
Well, we've issued a court order and the owners ignored us.
So what happens now?
We will have to go to the land registry and try and move the building into the council's ownership.
The silo is one of 10 properties featured in the Victorian Society's annual list of endangered buildings. Joe O'Donnell says they've noticed a growing problem of developers buying listed buildings only to leave them to deteriorate.
It really does dominate Grimsby's skyline, and it's really important both to the town and to its future, I think, as well as the past.
Are you seeing a lot of this kind of thing around the country at the moment?
Well, sadly, yes. Owners buy buildings like this and they perhaps don't realise the scale of the work that needs to be done, and it leads to situations like this where they just kind of wash their hands of it almost.
Clearly, the owner of the mill has a few questions to answer.
So a quick internet search tells me that CPG Investments Limited owns this particular silo with a Mr. Khalid Mahmood Chowdhury named as a director. And there are 2 addresses in Leicester which are associated with it.
We wrote to Mr. Chowdhury a few weeks ago but heard nothing. So we hit the road for Leicester. We find his listed address but are told he no longer lives there. Contacting his accountant gives us a Manchester link.
Hi there, I wonder if I could speak to Mr. Khalid Chowdhury, please. It's with regard to Victoria Mills, the building that his company CPG Investments owns up in Grimsby. Well, that gentleman was very helpful. He said that he knows exactly who he is and he's going to try and find him for us.
But not a peep from Mr. Chowdhury, so our trail has run cold.
I think the owner's been irresponsible. I mean, the risk to public safety has been tremendous, and the council's had to step in and use its reserves that are under pressure to repair this building. So really, we need to speak to the owner, he needs to speak to us, and so they can move on from here.
What do you think of the person who owns the silo next door?
On TV. That company or himself should have kept on top of it. If it had done the jobs as they come along, we wouldn't have had this problem.
Thanks to the council, Victoria Mills is safe for now. But there are plenty of people queuing up to put questions to its elusive owner, Mr. Chowdhury.
Well, Nick is here, and on that note of the council, you would think that North East Lincolnshire Council would be able to find him, because surely, Nick, they've had dealings with him with planning and what have you. How can he just vanish?
Well, you'd think the One Show would be able to find him as well, and we ended up in the wrong city, which is a little bit embarrassing. But sometimes these things happen. I think the point that we ought to make from the start is that there are likely to be plenty of Khalid Mahmood Chowdhurys out there, and lots of companies with the letters CPG in their initials. But if Mr. Mahmood Chowdhury is watching the programme tonight, he could save an awful lot of public expense by getting in contact with the council, and also put the minds of the residents who live either side of his property to rest. I mean, they've been moved out, they've been mucked around, their lives were potentially put in danger by his failure to carry out his responsibilities as that silo's owner.
So what's going to happen then in the interim? Because they have to make sure that the building is safe and secure, don't they?
Well, one way the council could try to seize control of the property is by going to court and arguing that they've invested so much in making that building safe that actually it overrides the value of the property. Now, if they do that, Mr. Chowdhury might suddenly break cover and have 1 or 2 things to say about it. But I think what they've got to do is understand that making the building safe is very important. The problem is, when they get hold of it, what are they going to do with it? The ideal thing would be to try and sell it on to a property developer who is going to turn it into flats, and then they could try and recoup some of their money. But there is a big question about the actual value of the property as a development itself. The buildings either side of it were developed before the financial crash in 2008. In today's climate, is it viable for a developer to go into a listed building spend the millions that would be required on these properties and then find, you know, that they're not actually going to sell that well. And this has wider implications because all the buildings on the Victorian Society's list of endangered structures are outside the southeast of England. Inside the southeast of England, you've got this superheated property bubble, and property developers will maintain their properties and sell them on and make money. In the rest of the country, it's a very different story.
There are so many in Cardiff, aren't there? Cardiff is the same. Wonderful Victorian buildings in Cardiff that are just being neglected, and people hope they'll fall down so that then, you know, they haven't got to do anything with them. They get their money, they put something new up. It's awful.
But come on, Mr. Khalid Mahmood Chowdhury, do the right
You
thing.
never know.
Get in contact. It's quite frankly ridiculous.
Or contact George Clark from George Clark's Amares and Spurses, because that would make an Amares and Spurs for somebody. You could go and live in that and it would be absolutely amazing.
That's a good one. That's good, that is.
Right, well, you might think that if you bulldoze the forest and you put a motorway on top of it, that would be the last that you would see of those trees.
But no, as George has been finding out, because with nature, with a little bit of help, it can bounce back in a truly surprising way.
On January 9th, 1996, a year after the controversial Newbury bypass order was signed, bulldozers fired up, beginning one of the largest mass popular protests Britain had ever seen.
There is no excuse for destroying all this wildlife and beauty.
The bypass was to condemn 10,000 mature trees and almost 360 acres of ancient woodland to be razed to the ground. Thousands descended on Snelsmore Common, the epicentre of the demonstrations.
This is dictatorial! This is the bulldozer of state!
Ultimately, the Newbury protests failed and this bypass was built. But 2 decades later, what remains of the forest isn't just archive of the protest, but the living descendants of those ancient trees. Phil Pritchard was one of the protesters.
The impact of non-violent direct action against road building during the 1990s, there were a lot of noisy defeats, but there were a lot of quiet victories. So when we heard about what was happening here, came here at the request of local campaigners and supported them to set up camps and build tree houses. Most people thought that's the end of the protest, but later that year, people came back and set up little vegetable growing gardens, permaculture plots, along the route of the bypass. There was a lengthy period where the bare land that had just been burnt and scoured by the bulldozers was left. The land responded by thousands of tiny, dormant acorns, sweet chestnut seeds sprouting, and a little shin-high forest grew. We just became aware that if we left them there, they were just going to get tarmacked and dug up. So we potted them up, and they went off all around the country.
Phil planted some of the rescued saplings in his old allotment that he hasn't seen for 5 years.
So there's 3 oaks and 1 silver birch. And the last time I saw them, they were a little bit taller than me, and now they are massive.
20 years growth, that's a substantial tree now, isn't it? So they are the descendants of the ones that were cut down.
So apparently the last 2 years they've had acorns, so that's just really special.
I know you shouldn't really, but
having a good hug.
You just really want to hug them. Because they're just such gorgeous trees. But some of what Phil describes as his refuge trees went further afield, 200 miles away to Keverall Farm in Cornwall.
That's amazing. I didn't realise a tree could grow that much in 20 years, because there's this little circle of oak trees around it. And then this big sweet chestnut. That's amazing. These are pictures from the day we planted them where Russ and Fran are helping. Russ is throwing up his arms in jubilation. That's sort of what I feel now. It's just the joy of knowing that the tree that was going to be destroyed is actually growing well.
Guy Shrubsole was 11 when he and his parents took part in the bypass protests.
I remember going on lots of walks in the forests and woodlands that were destined to be cut down to make way for the road. And on one of those walks, I picked up a pine cone and took it back home and grew the seeds from it. And as you can see, they've grown a lot bigger. They've become mature pine trees. One of them we once used as our Christmas tree, and then it grew a bit too big, and so we planted it on. Remembering the scene of devastation that I'd seen at the bypass when they'd cut down all the trees, and seeing all the protests, I was inspired really to go on and do that myself later in life.
20 feet above the northbound carriageway stands an old oak tree named Middle Oak by the people who lived up it for months. It was the only one of 10,000 mature trees to be spared. Well, there's no doubt that the tree climbers swayed public opinion, and later political policy changed too, virtually halting the construction of major new roads for a generation. As a tree lover, it's really great to see Middle Oak still here, but also to know that the descendants of the trees that were lost live on.
And incredible, given the chance to see how quickly those oaks can grow. It's beautiful, that. Thanks, George.
Yes, thanks, George. Right, we know that you two have been getting to know each other because of the tour, so we thought we'd start with a couple of questions each.
Oh,
so, Alistair, you've got one for Jasper.
That.
Jasper, you've got one for Alistair. Jasper, you start.
OK, so this is true or false?
This is options of 3, yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Go on, Alistair, go on.
It's a bit like Mr. and Mr.
I didn't bring my Specsavers.
Oh, I'll read it for you.
Shall I start?
Thank you.
Go on, then. OK, we can do this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, which of these statements
like
is
him.
true about Jasper?
Okay. I don't actually need specs, Matt.
So, A, I'm a skilled dowser and can use a forked stick to find underground water.
Right.
B, I was once voted in the top 10 best-looking Brummies. I'd go with that.
Right.
And 3, I secretly support Aston Villa.
It's definitely not the last one. OK, the Dowser, I like that. It's nice in the 70s, isn't it? I remember that. It was a big craze, wasn't it, Dowsing? But yeah, I'll go with your advice, Alex. Yeah, the middle one.
Nope.
It's the dowsing.
I'm dowsing.
Is that right?
I can yeah.
How into it are you? Are you properly into it then? Do you use it for other things other than finding water? Because you can actually tell, can't you, if something's true or false?
Well, I mean, the experts can find anything. They can go onto a map and dowse for gold and stuff. I just do general stuff like, you know, water pipes, electric things. But also, there's another branch of dowsing called kinesiology, which is using muscles, muscle strength, to test people for allergies and what's right or wrong. And it's quite involved.
See, I didn't expect that from Jasper, such detail.
There you are. Only on the one show.
Alistair, go on.
All right. Well, as this is kind of what I like to, I'll do this as David Mitchell for the hell of it. So, this is about me, not about David Mitchell. Try and remember that. I was once doing an impression of Andy Murray when Andy Murray walked in. He wasn't pleased. I once appeared naked on the West End stage. I have a dog and a cat, both named Alistair.
It's not the dog and the cat. Andy would have been thrilled to pieces that you were doing such a good impression of him, so I'm going to go for the middle one. You appeared naked on stage.
Well, actually, 2 of them are right. Somebody's made one of them up, but I was actually once doing an impression of Andy Murray, and Andy walked in, and he kind of knew it was happening, but so the idea was that he'd come in and kind of go, "What are you doing?" And he did. But so he wasn't pleased because he was acting, but he actually really loved it. But I have also appeared naked on the West End stage. Which is what you said.
He's appeared naked in our show.
In your show? Well, how did this all start, your show, then? Where did it come from?
Without the nudity.
We were thrown together a couple of years ago at the Henley Festival in Berkshire, and they had this 800-seater tent, and they didn't know what to do with it, and they asked me if I would do an hour, and I wasn't quite ready to do an hour at that stage, because I hadn't worked for ages, but I could do half an hour, and he could do half an hour, so they stuck us together.
Split it.
And we got on like a house on fire, and of course I've got a bit of form with working with Impressionists, because I did nearly 300 shows with Phil Cool. So I know that it actually works. It's 2 different styles of humour, because an impressionist is not that personal. You don't get the person on stage because they work behind characters for you know, the majority of the time they're on stage. But I work very personally, talking about stories and my views, whatever. So, and that's why it works, because it's comedy, 2 hours of comedy, but it's very different. And of course, he goes on first for half an hour, and then I'm backstage sweating, thinking, please don't run them out. Don't run them out. You know? And he's had a few coconuts into the back of his head before now. And then I go on, and then the second half, it's the same.
See, and then you get an early bath. That's perfect.
But no, it works well, and we've also got similar taste levels, I think, so people know that they're not going to suddenly have a real jarring morality or language thing. You know, we both use the same language and the same ideas, so... But it's a nice balance, isn't it?
It's terrific, yeah.
There we go.
An evening shared with Jasper Carrott and Alistair McGowan starts this Saturday, and it runs until next March. Wow.
On and off.
Now, on and off, not every day. Now, if you've ever wondered what 60s music legends PJ Proby, The Searchers and Gary Puckett and the Union Gap are up to now...
Wonder no more.
Every man knows that as he gets older, he might need to tone down the crazy hairstyles of his youth. Unless, of course, you're a veteran rock and roll star with an image to uphold. Your audience will always have a picture of you in their minds in your 20s, usually with long flowing locks, maybe even a ponytail. It's a lot to live up to. This is the 60s Gold Tour. Its stars are from the decade that changed the world, and they have the hair to go with it. The question is, do the icons of the 60s still have what it takes, now they're in their 70s? First up is one of the stars of the tour, Gary Puckett.
Get out of my mind.
When he had a monster hit with Young Girl, he was a mop-top 25-year-old. Now he's a rather greyer 73.
So the 60s were obviously known as quite a wild time. I mean, how
They
wild?
were a wild time.
It was a wild time, was it? How wild was it for Union Gap?
The word wild always, you know, elicits drugs and you know, orgies and things, and we weren't really a drug or orgy band as such, you know.
Okay.
And all these years later, he's still the sensible face of the 60s.
Truth is, I love the people and I love the music, but I also get up in the morning knowing that you know, I have a family to support and a daughter in medical school and things like that. You know.
How's that? All right?
Great.
Magic.
Well done.
You better run, girl. You're much too young, girl.
Waiting backstage is John McNally, singer and guitarist in The Searchers, who topped the UK charts in 1963 and 64.
Everybody's out on the town.
I think in the 60s, I mean, a lot of people were growing their hair and stuff like that, but you guys never really
Well,
went that way.
we all had quiffs in those days.
Okay.
But our dress sense was, we liked Cliff and the Shadows, and they liked all that suit business, and we thought, well, we should get suits, you know, black and white, that's it. And that's been our image ever since.
But surely they went a little bit wild.
The first few days until the novelty wore off, and then once you started touring, overnight trips and buses with beds in, it just became smelly and boring. All the lads getting half cut all the time, so you know, it got out of hand, so I didn't enjoy that part of it.
Ladies and gentlemen, will you please welcome The Searchers?
How's that?
Very nice, yes, superb. Saves me a few bob.
You happy?
Yes, I am.
Sweet, sugar from my honey.
Gary and John have survived the rock and roll years pretty unscathed, but not everyone was as level-headed.
So my next call is with a man who drained the 1960s to its last drop. He's out here in his motorhome. Wish me luck.
When PJ Proby arrived in the UK from Texas in 1964, he was an instant star. People had never seen anything like him, or his ponytail. Today, he is a bequiffed 77-year-old who is still very proud of his Barnet.
When did you last have it cut?
Last week.
Only last week?
Yeah, and permed.
You had it permed as well?
Yeah.
PJ had 11 hits in the UK, but is perhaps best remembered for something that happened one night in Croydon in 1965.
My pants split on stage. And Mary Whitehouse, who had this thing called the Morals Committee, went to town on me and had me banned from all theaters.
But now he's back, and so is his ponytail, which today comes in a detachable form.
How old is this? How long have you had this?
That is about 4 or 5 months old.
Oh, really? So it's quite new?
Yeah.
Expensive?
About 3,000 pounds.
Whoa. How long can you keep doing this for, do you think?
Forever.
You're happy to go on stage,
I'll dance right into a big old hole in the ground.
How's that? Looking good?
That's fine.
The three men I've met today have a combined age of 225 and are all very different.
But I think the one thing they all have in common, which keeps them looking so youthful, is rock and roll.
Well, Jasper, that was like a trip down memory lane.
Wasn't it?
For you, wasn't it? With all
I'm afraid so,
I think we do agree, though, that £3,000 for that ponytail seems a bit steep.
I'd use it.
Well, do you know what? We did
Fair enough.
have a look through the archives at lots of wonderful photos of nice hairdos. And then we thought, do you know what? Instead of just showing a picture, shall we go all the way back to 1978 and relive one of your early big shows? Let's have a look.
Oh, no.
I've always been pretty good on the guitar. I was a child prodigy. I was pretty clever as a kid. I used to practice for hours, and like the neighbours used to keep throwing bricks to the window so they could hear better.
Lovely hair. yesterday. But where are you now with kind of new material, and how does that fit into your world of comedy now?
Well, from previous times on the show, I mean, I've just sort of rediscovered stand-up over the last couple of years. And I've been writing new stuff. And, of course, there's so many comedians out there that it's very difficult to try and get something for yourself. So I talk about getting old, which they can't do, because they're all fetuses. I mean, and so I'm concentrating on that. Yeah. And of course, what is interesting working with Alistair is that he brings a younger audience in. So it's interesting that we appeal to each other's audience. And of course he works, you know, they're all 25 and under, and they don't actually watch you because they've all got iPhones and they're watching you live.
Of course.
Yeah. And it's terrific to be back. And so I'm working on. I used to do a very popular routine about car insurance claim form statements. I don't know if you ever remember. It's what people write on claim form. I drove out of my drive at 7 o'clock in the morning straight into a bus. The bus was 5 minutes early. And I've been researching all the new ones. I won't do any because I'm still collecting them. So it's a fascinating journey of rewriting, because I've always said I always write about who I am, what I am, where I am, and that always changes, so the material always changes. But I have not enjoyed myself on stage this much ever.
Oh,
it's brilliant.
Well, because you've got this new tour, and because, Alistair, you've got a few new impressions, which we might have time to fit in just before we go, we're going to do a quick game, OK?
Yeah.
Some lovely people volunteered a few impressions. There's 2 things to guess in each clip. Here's clip 1. Here we go.
This time next year, we'll be millionaires, Rodney.
So,
OK, yeah, so we've got the voice of one celebrity
and a catchphrase
of the other.
I think it's Del Boy and Citizen Khan.
Nearly.
No.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
And you're right.
I thought it was Citizen Khan.
But very up to date. Very up to date, as we were saying. Let's move on to the next one, shall we? Here we go.
You are the weakest link. Goodbye.
Against
well,
what you did.
It's Anne Robinson's catchphrase, but who was she doing? I don't know. I'd say
Arnie.
Arnie again?
I reckon it's Arnie.
Arnie again.
It is a male. It is a male.
Somebody New Yorkie, isn't it? I don't know who that was.
Robert De Niro.
Oh, De Niro. Okay.
And the last one, just very quickly.
Confused by the gender.
Toto, I've got a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Michael Caine doing Judy Garland.
Yes! Very good.
Correct. Well done. Have we got time? Yeah, we have got time for just a few of your brand new ones. Please, can you do some of the cast from Gogglebox?
Yeah, well, I'm only working on them, so they're not perfected yet. But I like Sandy and Sandra, who all I can do is...
Love Sandra.
When she says, what's that all about? What's that all about? That's all I can do so far. Giles and Mary, I love Giles in Wiltshire. He says, oh, Mary, I don't know. What's going on there, Mary? Could I have another grape, Mary, please? Do you think I sound like Alan Bennett without a Yorkshire accent? I do. And Stephen and Chris, of course, in Brighton. Yeah, what's all this about then? I don't know. What is that? I don't know. Do you know? No, I've never seen it. Have you? No, I haven't. I don't even know which of us he's doing anymore. Do you know? No, do I? And obviously Leon as well.
Oh, I love Leon.
I love the One Show, June. Don't you like the One Show, June? Oh, the One Show's lovely, isn't it, June?
Actually, they did us, didn't they? Do you remember they did us? But anyway, that's all we've got time for tonight. A very big thank you to Alistair and to Jasper. Their tour and evening shared with Jasper Carrott and Alistair McGowan starts this Saturday, and as we were saying, it runs until March next year with breaks.
Yes. Now, we're going to be back tomorrow and we'll be talking to the stars of Inferno, Tom Hanks, Felicity Jones and director Ron Howard.
If that's not enough, we're also going to have Gregory Porter. He's going to be performing for us live as well. So whatever you do, don't miss tomorrow night's One Show.
See you at 7
Thanks,
o'clock.
lads. Good night.
Thank you.